This is TWiT. Now, I've seen a lot of people, at least before they got the MacBook Air and before they got the Tom Bogan briefing that you got, Renee, a lot of people looking at the MacBook Air saying, A, Apple could have done this years ago. Oh, there it is. Ooh, the Apple could have done this years ago. B, it's just not enough of a change. It's not enough of, and C, what is this Y processor that Intel's put in here? So, Renee, is it reasonable to say that the MacBook Air is a disappointment?
So they could have absolutely done it years ago. I think the prevailing wisdom was that the MacBook would drop in price and take the MacBook Air slot the way the MacBook Air had dropped in price. Like we have to remember, the original MacBook Air came out at $1799 and didn't do much after that. The second edition came out in 2011 at $1299, but by 2014 dropped to $999. And I think people thought the MacBook, which came out I think at $1299, would drop down to that $999 point, and there'd be something new. It would become the new MacBook Air, and there'd be a MacBook in between, and that would make so much sense. MacBook, and if you wanted ultimate portability, MacBook Air, and if you wanted ultimate power, MacBook Pro, but it didn't work. And the MacBook 12-inch, my understanding is it's still expensive to make. It's got expensive parts in it, and I guess Apple was just. There's a lot to the story, and I think we'll hear about it probably next year. But Apple was looking to do something more with that machine, and just things did not work out, not with Intel, not with Apple, not with everything. So rather than just keep waiting, they made a conscious decision at the same time they started talking about the new Mac Pro to update everything else in the line, including the Mac Mini and the MacBook Air. And this is the update that they could do now, given the chips they're using and all the other technology they have. So it's sort of like, to use the Steve Jobs analogy, a MacBook, the 12-inch MacBook, hooked up with the previous MacBook Air and had this little baby that's still wedge-shaped but has less bezels. It's not a liquid retina. It doesn't have the rounded corners, but has like the super fast SSD, has the Touch ID, no touch bar, but it is sort of that new generation MacBook Air. It doesn't have the touch bar. And the controversial part, as far as I was thinking, and I was upset about this when I first heard about it, is that it doesn't use the U series Intel chips, which the previous one did, which the MacBook Pro does. It uses the Y series, which is what the MacBook was using, which used to be called Core M, but now Intel thinks it's funny just to call it I series.
So this is a Core M processor.
It was, yeah, it used to be. It's now called Y. But it's
the M
Amber
is what
Lake.
they use in the MacBook, and it really is a pig.
Yes, and so the MacBook currently has Kaby Lake, Core M, and then basically Core M3, M5, M7, but they call they still use M for the 3, but they use I for the 5 and the 7, and it's a mess. This uses Amber Lake, which is not Coffee Lake. Coffee Lake is the U series, but it was explained to me. First, I got yelled at by a bunch of the other smarter tech bloggers there who actually write about silicon all day. And they're like, you can't just look at a name on a chip. You have to look at the base frequencies, the turbo frequencies, and the thermals, and then find out what kind of job it can do. Because if it does a really good job, it doesn't matter if it's Y series. If it does a really bad job, it doesn't matter if it's U series. And according to them, and then what I managed to ask about and verify later, is that it's got pretty good base frequencies, it's got pretty good turbo frequencies, and it's got a really good it's 5 watts, so it doesn't put out a lot of heat, which means that it doesn't get throttled the way a U series would in this casing. Apple could have made a bigger casing, but then you literally get the bottom level MacBook Pro, and you can go with that.
Apple, though, I think has clocked it up, because the TDP on this I thought was 7 watts.
Yes, it's a custom variant of Core Y that didn't exist until Apple asked for it, and Intel hurriedly put it up on the page after Apple announced it.
Is 7 watts faster than 5 watts?
So I don't know. Like, you'd have to get like Ian Cudris or somebody from or like Ryan Smith from AnandTech on, because it really is so complicated now. Like I said, like literally every time I go to sleep and I wake up, there's a new Lake processor from Intel.
It's very confusing, and Intel is it feels like intentionally muddying the waters. I don't think they even want us to understand.
No, but I mean, I've been running benchmarks. I've been running stuff. I used to use a MacBook Air all the time. It's still, for everything up to trying to render Final Cut fast, it works well. Like, I can do everything I want to do on it.
See, that's the thing. I have a lot of affection for that form factor.
Yes.
I almost went back to a MacBook Air, even with that horrid screen and those giant bezels. That was what stopped me, just because I liked that form factor. And who could forget in 2008, Steve Jobs pulling a MacBook Air out of a manila envelope? I mean, it's beautiful.
Yes.
It created a whole product category, the Ultrabook.
The Ultrabook, yeah. It was Ultrabook Zero.
And everybody copied them.
Yep.
Could somebody get me the Huawei MateBook? We have a MateBook X here. And everybody said this is what the next MacBook Air should be.
Yeah.
It's not.
No, so it's not. It's not the redesign. The redesign for the Air and the redesign for the MacBooks and the redesign for the iMac is still coming, and that'll probably look more like the Liquid Retina displays with the Face ID. This is sort of like a next generation MacBook.
Is this just for people like me who love the MacBook Air, who are nostalgic, and we just want a little bit of a refresh? I love it that it has a T2. It has a fingerprint reader. I actually love it that it doesn't have a touch bar. This is what some people were saying. Oh, this is the Huawei MateBook 10 Pro. They said, oh, this is what the Mac... Look at the bezel. Well, you can't even see it because it's not on, but it has a fingerprint reader. It kind of looks like a MacBook Pro. Touch screen. There are... Bezels are infinitely small. There was one negative because of the small bezels. Actually, you're not even seeing... This looks like the bezels are bigger, but this is just an image that doesn't go all the way to the edge. The one negative on this is there's nowhere to put the camera because of the small bezel. So they put it in the keyboard, and it's a nostril.
So it looks
cam.
right up your nose?
Yeah, but on the upside, you can turn it off by closing pressing
Couldn't they just do a notch? I mean, haven't we just conceded the war to the notches at this point?
No notch on my desktops.
Periscope. I want a webcam periscope.
Yeah,
a mechanical chucher. It just chuches the camera up, takes your photo, chuches it back down.
So if I could get, I'll be honest, if I could get Mac OS on this would be awesome. It's got a real processor. It's got a U processor.
My guess that is coming with the Face ID Macs.
The Face ID Mac. Oh, so you think there'll be a Face ID Mac?
Yeah, it's just. I mean, they're just getting Touch ID pushed out, and they just got Face ID into the iPad. So
okay, that was what some
Mac
people were saying was, why isn't there Face ID on this thing?
Yeah, I mean, iPad gets it next. That's just the reality. It went from iPhone, iPad gets it next, and then Mac gets it. Same as Touch ID. So
you said yes when I asked you the question. This is for people who love the MacBook Air and just want a little bit of a more.
It's for most people. Like I would say, if you're all confused, if you just want to get a MacBook, the MacBook Air is the main.
But $100 more, I could get the MacBook, the no touch bar MacBook Pro.
Yeah, but that has way more. Like there's more. You're giving up more to get. Like, it is like what I was shocked by how much smaller it still is. It is so tiny, even compared to the MacBook Air. But you are the performance isn't as good. It's still running Kaby Lake. It does come in the new gold color, but it's not quite as nice. As a general purpose computer, it really is for an executive or a startup person, jet setting, and they want the lightest thing possible. Is it faster than the MacBook? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, considerably.
That's what Lisa wants. She likes her MacBook a lot, but she's really become disappointed by its performance. So it will be a little faster than that.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if they decided to make the MacBook Nothing the entry-level MacBook, where they found a way to sell it for $899, because it is the size itself is compelling. Every millimeter, there's sort of like an asymptotic relationship. No, I'm sorry, that's. and he's. Right. Can I made myself laugh so much that I coughed.
We're gonna send you back to math class.
It's like when you have something like the MacBook Pro, and you make this big MacBook still big but a little bit smaller. Those extra couple of millimeters, they don't matter. They may as well have not bothered. When you take a machine that is already really, really small and you take a small amount off of it, it almost becomes a different thing. And we forget. I don't have a MacBook Nothing, so it's not until like I go handle one again that I remember that this is essentially the size of an iPad. It's essentially as thick as an iPad. They could really get away with, yes, this is not the most powerful machine we've made by any stretch whatsoever. We are in a neck and neck race with Raspberry Pi for being able to render pages as quickly. But if they could sell, here's $900. Here's a $900 machine that runs the latest version of Mac OS and will compete with all of the really good $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 Windows machines out there that are convertible. That would be wonderful, because we have the same problem with the MacBook Air that we had with the Mac Mini, as far as I'm concerned, where it's wonderful. I'm very, very pleased with it, but it's still the minimum buy-in has gone up by a couple $100. I'm not really thrilled with that.
I think the MacBook Air will drop.
Go ahead, Alex.
Actually, a question for Renee or Andy is with the specs, isn't the new iPad faster than the new?
We haven't gotten to the iPad. Yeah. That's my point. Is they went through all this, and they said, but forget all that. Wait till you see the A12 Bionic. A12X Bionic. Wait till you see. Yeah, the A12 is actually faster than some MacBook Pros.
If you're a fan of the Geekbench, Leo, the new the current MacBook is 3093 single, 4870 multi. The new MacBook Air is 4239 single, 7846 multi.
That's faster.
And the top end MacBook Pro is still 5299 single and 21501 multi, because it's got an i9 in it.
The thing that and that's what I actually am using. I'll be going from an i9 MacBook Pro to perhaps to a MacBook Air, but I think I like the portability. I like the form factor.
The MacBook won't drop. My guess is MacBook won't drop just because it remains expensive for Apple to make it. So they're going to position it as you're willing to pay extra for minuscularity. Yeah. But the MacBook Air always starts high. Again, $1799 and then $1299. This one's $1199. So it's the cheapest the first edition, the first release model has ever been. But then it drops to $999, and I'm hoping
that's important. That's important. It's the cheapest that the MacBook Air release edition has ever been.
Yes.
So that means it can get down in a year or two to $999.
I think that, like, if you're a pessimist, you're going to say that Apple knows people are hungry for it and will charge them every cent they can the minute it comes out, and then lower the price to get to more people. If you're an optimist, you'll say that it's expensive to put it out, so Apple wants to recoup the production costs as fast as possible, and then as it scales, they'll adjust the price to a more mainstream point.
You do lose some stuff. You lose the SD card reader. You lose some connectors.
Yes.
You've got basically all you've got is two Type C Thunderbolt 3 connectors,
and 3.5 millimeter,
and a headphone jack. Which we're going to have to start now mentioning every time, because otherwise just assume it's gone.
Apple Park is built on a graveyard of 3.5 millimeter.